right in. Thanks for the intro. Gopal, maybe I can start with you. Would you be able to share a little bit about TBS Capital and kind of like high-level investment theses and the fund size?
Sure. So we're a mid-market growth equity fund. We pretty much invest in consumer-driven opportunities. In Hyderabad, for example, we have the MedPlus pharmacy stores that you're very familiar with, or the Chili's restaurants, which I'm sure you must have visited, and if not, please do visit. So we have two funds. We manage about 1,200 crores in between the two funds, and mainly we invest in, I would say, early stage growth, all the way up to late stage growth, but largely in what we call lifestyle and leisure. For example, we are the investors in the largest online beauty products business, Nykaa.com, an amazing woman entrepreneur to showcase, to restaurants, to pharmacies, and a lot of our time goes into banks and to things like power exchanges.
That's great. So Ray, OPIC, maybe you can talk about what is OPIC, and also how does OPIC support American businesses in emerging markets, and why emerging markets? I think that would be as well.
Okay, well, first of all, OPIC is a U.S. government agency that invests into developing countries and emerging markets. I'm a political appointee. I came in the office this summer. I was in private business in Dallas, Texas, and so this is my first governmental experience. But OPIC has approximately $30 billion in capital, and we can't go into any U.S. markets like U.S. Virgin Islands or areas like that. But we have business in 133 countries, and typically what we look for is we have three product types. We have a political risk insurance, so we can go into a country that might have some political risk, and people are afraid their businesses might be expropriated by the government, or terms of a contract might be changed, and we insure around that. Secondly, we do a structured deal where we'll invest in an individual deal like an LNG plant or something like that. I can put up to $500 million into a single deal. And the third thing is we invest in the funds, much like potentially his fund that would be sector focused. And in India, we're an investor in 7 different funds. We have about $550 million invested in India. We also, on our structured side in insurance, we have about $1.5 billion currently in India. We've been doing business here since 1974. Been very successful. We've invested hundreds of millions of dollars into this market, and I currently have about $1 billion in deals that we are evaluating right now to do in this market.
Is there some active projects that you can share?
Well, one thing we did recently was Yes Bank. We gave them a credit facility of $250 million that they use to do small and medium-sized business loans out of, because they know the local market. They know the credit of the borrowers, but it goes down to small and medium businesses. I can't manage that out of Washington, D.C., so we do it with a local partner. They also invest money into these loans as well. In addition to that, we have a women's initiative that we have launched, and part of the Yes Bank deal is $50 million of the $250 is earmarked to go for women-owned businesses and operated businesses.
That's amazing. Talking about private equity, the fundraising is on a rise. I mean, I think Gopal, you and I were talking offline, specifically on the U.S. side. We hit a track record in it's a 10-year high. So do you guys feel from the Indian market outlook, is it the trend the same? And also, I'd love to hear from you. Do you expect from the U.S. side trends to continue as well?
Well, I think looking at India, this year has been an amazing year for investing overall. This year, I think in India, we expect about $22 or $23 billion of investments to take place, which is an all-time high. And just think about the fact that it's about 2% of the GDP, which also is a very good number. Fundraising has been amazing. In India, we have a structure called the Alternate Investment Fund Regulation of the government. It started about 5 years ago. And this year, it has hit a record number of dry powder, and including, total pooling of 100,000 crores. That's about $16 billion. And it's growing at about 25%. For the first time, and I'm glad that OPIC has done so much for India, but the domestic capital is beginning to grow. Nearly 80,000 of that, which is say 12 billion, is actually rupee capital. So the new development in India is actually rupee money from insurance companies, HNIs, banks, and the government's own fund called SIDBI, or the fund of funds, as it's called, coming into venture capital and private equity. I think that's the best thing that's happening for entrepreneurs, and that's the reason why you're seeing this kind of surge in investing. $23 billion is a significant amount of money. The last time we hit it was when there was the so-called frenzy. This time there's no frenzy. There's, I think, a lot more of calm investing.
That's right. That's right. And I think from the Indian market, I think from the U.S. side, do you expect the trends to continue as well?
Well, what OPIC does, we're a debt product, and whereas he's equity. We have very inexpensive debt, and what we try to do is lean into markets that typical commercial banks won't go into for various reasons. And for example, I was in Vietnam 3 weeks ago, and we are putting $500 million into a LNG plant in southern Vietnam. The American power company that was going to build the plant couldn't find a U.S. bank to lend money into Vietnam because of the political risk there. And so we did it's a $3 billion deal. We did a $3 billion insurance policy, and as well as put in $500 million, but we're senior debt. And so really the way an economy does, we're so senior to everything else, it's not a big worry. He's more risk capital. He borrows from people like us, but we're very cheap debt, and he gets all the big money when it does so well. We just hope to get our money back. But one thing that what we try to do is the U.S. government's belief that a strong economy, a strong middle class in countries lead to stable governments. And so in countries like a Vietnam or a Bangladesh or Honduras, if we can create businesses that employ a lot of people, that stabilizes an economy, and that's really more what we're looking at. We're not looking to be, even though our agency, we made approximately $300 million last year for the U.S. taxpayer, on a $30 billion portfolio, it's not that much money because that's really not our objective. Our objective is, for example, in Afghanistan, we finance the largest employer in Kabul. It's a textile company, has 4,000 employees. Well, if we hadn't gone in there, no other bank would have gone in there, and 4,000 people would be walking around on the streets. And so for us, that is a stabilizing effect. So we look at it really as a foreign policy tool to create stable economies.
As a follow-on to that one, and based of OPIC and also your prior experiences as a serial entrepreneur, I think as a first-time founder or even, I think it's normal for founders to target VC, and they don't think about other sources of financing. What would be your advice, considering the check sizes are different, expectations are different? What would your advice be for the founders to prepare themselves right? And what should the right language be to talk to you guys?
To OPIC specifically?
No, or any investors. I mean, I think from a debt or equity standpoint, from private equity standpoint.
Well, one thing there's an old saying in investing, you bet on the jockey, not the horse. Because if you bet on a confident manager that knows their business, is passionate about it, they can adjust to whatever the market is going to be. And I've invested before I got into government service, in dozens of companies, and I always found the most successful ones where the person that came to pitch me the deal, I had confidence that when things went wrong or things changed on them, they could easily adapt to it without being so stuck in the lane of what they think is right. And when they do, they end up being successful. But you got to be able to sell that to whoever you're raising money from, that you're a confident person, that you adapt, and also that the market, whatever you're going into, there actually is a market for it. I own a bunch of restaurants, and one time a guy came to me and pitched a restaurant deal, and I said, what's your concept? He goes, well, it's a restaurant everyone's going to eat at least once a year. I said, what is it? It's called the Happy Birthday Restaurant. And I was like, that isn't such a great idea, I don't think, because I don't think some young person wants to go spend their birthday with someone older. And so you get a lot of crazy ideas. You have to filter them through, but it's really having the confidence. And really what we're looking for, and he looks for the same, is someone that's got experience. And it doesn't have to be so much experience running the deal, but it's experience when you ask them questions, they have answers.
How about you?
I think for many people in India especially, there's a lot of venture capital funded companies that are now coming into private equity. If you look at the last 1 year, you'll find a lot of venture companies wanting to come to PE, and PE funds are looking actively at late-stage venture companies to invest in. For example, we've invested in Nykaa, which is a late-stage venture company, which when I say late stage venture, I mean something that's growing at about 8 to 10% a month. And yet, we think they will come to where private equity wants. What does a private equity investor wants? That's the theme of this discussion. We look for value more than valuation. We want to see underlying cash flow. We want to see EBITDA positive. We want to see ROE, because that's really where we can then get a good exit. For us, we always love to make 5 or 10x, but making 3 to 4x is really the dharma of a private equity investor, not to do the 10x's. If they happen, that's serendipity. So I think my advice to entrepreneurs who come for private equity funding at that stage is make sure you're building a great business, make sure you have clear visibility to making a profit, and in the balance between growth and profit, keep profit in mind is very, very important. And then like Ray said, ultimately what we look for is how capable is this person? And in the private equity phase, you also have to have the capability of being able to manage teams. One thing we see a lot of are great startups, but when they come to the PE phase, it's about scale, and scale means people, and people means your ability to work with teams. So in addition to being a resilient and tenacious entrepreneur with a good high level of ambition, we look for, I think today it's become a major issue, is to find people who can run large teams. That's a tough transition. Many people make it and some don't. Last thing I think when you're looking for private equity is, especially when you're inviting an investor to be a minority owner in your business, you have to be able to convince them that 5, 7 years down the road, you will still be aligned to the investor's interest of wanting to sell the business. I'm not sure this is such a big problem in the States, but in India, many of us, we like to own our businesses so much. We're in love with our businesses, so we just don't want to let go. Whereas your private equity investor wants to get his or her exit in that 5-year window or 6-year window. So just think about that very, very carefully. And if you're sure you can do that and you can stay committed, then I think private equity is the right one for you.
That's great. I mean, I think you raised a great point on the team as well. Team plays such a key part on the success of a founding team. So one of the things I wanted to ask you, Ray, is, you've built a ton of businesses from ground up. What are some of the common mistakes that you have done that you've come and kind of overcome that you can kind of advise the founders on the ground here as a part of the fundraising process and also building a company? That would be, like, if you had to choose 1 to 2 advice, what would that be?
Well, there are a lot of problems I haven't overcome either. So, I mean, it's really having a passion for what you're doing. Because I've invested in some things where people have come in with some interesting ideas, and I didn't know anything about that business. I'll give you an example. I invested in a group of magazines that a person brought to me, and they'd never been in the business before, but it sounded like a good story. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know the questions to ask. I got into it. It was a colossal failure. And it was because I couldn't step in. I only go into business if there's a problem with it. I feel confident enough. I personally could step in and go to the office that day and somehow pull it out of the nosedive and bring it in. But in the case of that magazine business, I went to the offices that day and I had no idea what to do. I didn't know the questions to ask or things like that. So I won't go into anything that I can't at least have the old, you hear the elevator pitch. The same thing. If I can't describe what I'm getting into in an elevator ride, then I don't want to do it. So,
what have you seen from your portfolio or your investments, even from your prior experiences, that the founders have done common mistakes that, if you were them, that you're like, okay, don't do that? What are some of the advices that you can give to a founder perspective?
well, some of them are just too overconfident, too. I mean, they're a little over their skis. You come in and, you always got to be, if somebody's coming in, I'm talking about pure startup, just raw. And the guy shows up in a nice car and nice clothes and all that kind of stuff. You got to be a little suspicious that he doesn't realize it's going to be late nights, hard work, and it's not going to be driving around that nice car and things. It's going to be, and sometimes overconfidence is gets people excited, and a lot of times overconfidence isn't good.
Absolutely. Gopal, your thoughts?
I'm just going to take your question on, what entrepreneurs, what mistakes can they make during fundraising? And I think the thing that I see most often, we typically talk to about 40 entrepreneurs for every deal we make. We get about 100 deals. We talk to 40 people, maybe 20, 25 on the phone, and 10, 15 we would meet significantly before we take that one call. And I think the biggest mistake I see is, I think Ray talked about overconfidence, a great point. I also see the tendency, therefore, to overpitch, which comes from that kind of tense, saying, oversell the business and not be real, whereas investors are looking for the real story. And I think a tendency to second guess us. So they're constantly trying to figure out what we want to know. Actually, what we want to know is what you want to really tell us, rather than what we want to know. So constantly we hear stories, they've read enough. Today in the internet, you can get 20 pitch decks from 20 different websites. They've read those pitch decks, they've honed the elevator pitch. But tell us what you really dream of, what you think you can do with the business. I think that is very, very critical. The last thing I think is, we look for people who, at least my investing style, to me, I really look for people who enjoy doing their business. Because if they don't enjoy their business, those late nights of doing boring things are going to get to them. And they're going to just fall away in the wayside. In the Bhagavad Gita, there's a line which says, Samatvam yoga muchyate. When Krishna defines what is yoga, calmness, samatvam. So I think we need to think about people who love their work. And people who love their work have a great chance of not only succeeding, but making people around them love what they're doing equally. So I look a lot for people who enjoy their work.
Right. Well, we're old enough to remember the late 90s when the dot-com thing hit. And I'll never forget, everyone sitting around us, because Mark Cuban, who a lot of you know of, was my age, and I passed on investing in his company, Broadcast.com. A lot of my friends went in it. And then when he sold it, made all this money, we all felt stupid. And so all these other dot-coms started coming in for all these crazy stuff from your friends and things. You just started throwing money at this stuff because you thought, well, I missed that one. But the people doing it didn't know anything about what they were doing either. They just thought everybody else making money in dot-com. And you see that in business, these waves of things that go through. When I got out of school in 1983 in Texas, oil was big. So everybody you knew was wanting to go in the oil business. And so guy comes and pitches. He didn't know anything about the oil business. And then the next phase was, the dot-com. And then it was hedge funds. And then, so there's this wave of investing goes through. You just got to look through these people and say, are you doing it because you're passionate about it, or are you doing it because that's the flavor of the day? And
Right.
I keep thinking about the dot-com deal of how many of these things just disasters because no one knew what they were doing, but everyone felt like you had to do something because some people were making money. I'm sure you...
That's right. In fact, 2 years ago, it was everybody starting what they call dark kitchens and saying we can order on the internet, our kitchens are hidden away. And we said, look, if you really don't enjoy food and being a restaurateur, it doesn't matter whether the kitchen is dark or bright. You just have to love running a restaurant. And, I think 9 out of 10, or maybe more actually, just folded for exactly the reason you're saying.
That's great. I think as a founder, absolutely money matters, so which is what we're addressing here. And also, I think it's also the how to structure it also is critical as a part of success. How do you choose your investors, like domestic investors versus foreign investors? We have a foreign investor here, and a domestic investor here. So I would love to hear kind of perspective, because, Gopal, you're focused on India. You're focused on, that's kind of your core. What do you think that the founders should be looking from that perspective?
No, I think, the founders are really going to see the GP, the actual equity investment manager, to use Indian language. Now, the investment manager may have foreign money, which is 83% of the money in the country today, or they may have a mix of foreign and Indian money. We are kind of unique in the sense we don't take foreign money. We only took Indian money as a policy. The reason we did that is, when I came into the business, I was 50 years old. I'd done about 9 businesses on my own before. And I felt somehow that if I, as a business person, who's my client? My client is my investor. And my investors are going to say, this is the way I think we need to do it, and they're going to ask a set of questions. If ultimately we will do what our clients tell us to do, whether we like it or not, somewhere in our minds start getting influenced. So I decided that we'll only take rupee money, because Indian investors think like the local market. Surely that means they may also have some blind spots. That's not what goes with the package. But they gave us a huge amount of freedom to do what we wanted to do. They said, we trust you. You started 9 businesses. You come from a very reputed business house. So do what you want. So I think the important thing from an investee perspective, a founder and entrepreneur perspective is you've got to choose the investor that you believe you need if you have options. For example, you might want to invest, you might be the kind of guy or gal who wants to go at super high speed and you want somebody to question you and slow you down. On the other hand, we've got some really successful entrepreneurs who need to be pushed to go even faster. They're very good at what they do, but they need speed. So you've got to choose the kind of investor you want. For example, many people come to us because we bring governance. Some people come to us because we bring great networks. So I think the clarity on what you want is important. I really don't think it matters much to the founder whether the money in the fund is foreign or Indian. It doesn't really matter much. It really matters which investment matter you choose. And you must think through that with your advisors and your bankers. Because typically in India, Ray, even the smallest of deals come through investment banks, which is quite unusual.
Any follow-on thoughts?
No, but at OPIC, wearing my OPIC hat, we're a bank. And a bank, you know, I'm not a private equity investor, and the money we invest, we've been around since 1971, but I rent money out. And we get money back. And so we have to do $5 to $6 billion a year in transactions to keep moving. So we're very, very actively looking at investments. And so, but we have a character test. It's a pretty robust, you know, credit policy. But we do small loans, and we do as small as a $500,000 loan, up to $500 million. And so as the transactions come through, that's why we do things like with Yes Bank, because I need that local expertise to loan the money. And so all I'm looking for, and we only charge 4 to 5% in interest, because again, we're trying to lean in markets where typical banks won't go. And the only way we can do that to incentivize other investors is give them cheap debt, but they have to come up with a good slug of equity. So at the end of the day, if someone's putting in 25% equity, then I feel pretty confident they're not going to let that, like the deal, the LNG deal I did in Vietnam, I'm going to be senior debt at $500 million, and there's going to be $2.5 billion of equity or mezz debt behind me. Well, I'm pretty confident that deal is going to work out because they're going to chase that $2.5 billion. So all I'm interested in is renting the money out and getting it back. And I know I have a cap on what I can make. He says he wants to make 4 or 5 times his money. I'm making 4 or 5%. So,
But you stand the first position in the queue.
position, yeah.
And
Well, that's the cost of risk.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
With Women First Prosperity for All, I have to ask this question to both of you. The asset management industry absolutely has, I mean, it's obvious that it has a diversity problem. At least from the stats we've seen, only like just 1.1% of the 71 trillion market of the private equity, mutual funds, hedge funds, real estate investment funds have been dominated, actually has been managed that are not owned by women or minorities. So what are some of the things that you would, from your view, some of the systemic ways that you think as male advocates that you could do to kind of change this? I know it's a long journey, but what are some of the things that you think male advocates could do?
as far as like in finding funds to invest.
Absolutely.
Well, that's one thing going to conferences like this. We're encouraging people to do it. But we see it as probably the biggest source is through fintech, through financial services, because if we can empower women through microloans and things like that, that's going to build through education and a growing middle class of people for us to eventually do business with. As far as women-owned businesses on large projects and things, we're open to any that come in.
Absolutely. And Gopal, I think we had an interesting conversation on this one. Love to hear your perspective on India, and especially the sandwich analogy that you mentioned. And if you care to share, that would be...
I just first want to say that India is very fortunate in one respect, many respects, but one I wish to highlight is the fact that in the financial services industry, we've really had the good fortune to have some very talented women in leading positions. If you take our fund management industry, I saw Vani Kola here today. It's one of the best VCs that India has produced. Renuka Ramnath, one of the best private equity investors. The Shweta Jalan, she runs Advent in India. If you look at the banks, you have Shika, you have Chanda. So you've really been, I think, very fortunate to have such talented people. And as Mrs. As Kocher, the chairman of ICICI Bank, said last week at a University of Michigan forum, she said, we have succeeded because we only let the best women on the basis of merit go through. So we never had any policy to encourage women, but we had a huge policy to support women through their transitions and make sure they have a safe working place. And that's the reason why we attracted the best women to come and work for us. So I think India has been fortunate that way. And as I was saying to you, Priya, I look at India as a sandwich. At the top, I think there are amazing opportunities for women. There are encouragement. In fact, we need to make sure they take advantage of their potential and their opportunities sometimes. At the bottom of India, this matter of survival. You have women and men do whatever they need to do. It's, I think, in the middle of India where we have all the challenges, the big middle of India, where basically I think there are perhaps past habits, culture, experiences. But both at the top and the bottom, I think women today are really doing well. I am very lucky because I think the best company, the most attractive return that we've produced are in two companies, in both of involving women leaders. So honestly, as investors, we are just in the business of getting great returns for our investor, for our LPs. So we are really quite neutral to...
That's great, that's great. I wanted to open up audience questions because the panelists are very open. As you can tell, they're candid to share their experiences. And so any questions, we can pass the mic around. We have like 10 minutes. I see a question right there in the middle.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the lovely insights. My question is that at what stage would we know that we can go to a late stage private equity, late stage VC or a private equity? Is it the quantum or is it the scale of the company or at what stage? We still don't have clarity because when we raised our first fund, we had money from a high-end angel, but they projected themselves as a PE company. I was not even aware what's a PE VC then. So I just wanted to find out at what stage would we have to choose venture companies, private equity companies, and all that for the venture. I run a manufacturing company, so I just wanted this clarity.
Can you state your name and the name of the company?
My name is Hema. I run a company by name Ampere Vehicles. We make battery-operated cycles and scooters out of Coimbatore. It's a completely women-run company, and we engage 30% our women workforce.
That's awesome.
You know, Hema, I think basically two things I would look at, two vectors, right? One is look at your growth rate, and one is look at what is your sight of cash flow. So you need to kind of ride the two balances. If you're growing really, really fast and cash flow is very distant, then really you just need to go to VC. But if you're growing fast and you can see cash flow, maybe a year down, maybe 15 months down, 4 or 5 quarters, then I would go to a private equity company. Private equity companies would actually reduce their check sizes for companies that have some visibility for cash flow, but really have high-speed growth. So for example, I think you can get check sizes of 25, 30 crores from a private equity firm today, which you couldn't get maybe some time ago. It was typically $10 million, 60, 70 crores. So there is a big shift, I would say. So these are the two vectors I would encourage everybody to look at. If you can see lots of cash flow, then you probably, if you're not growing faster, you don't need money because you have so much of cash flow. So if you have enough growth, then you can go for larger check sizes. And today, I think there's a trend also, many founders want to get some liquidity, not just for themselves, but for their employees. Many of them have worked hard and have ESOPs and they want liquidity. So ride those two rails, but you have to have 20, 30% growth minimum, otherwise you won't get any investor. But then if you get 100% growth, then you might get a private equity investor if you can show them that cash flow is 4, 5 quarters away.
That's great. There's a question here.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you very much. My name is Roxana Caguas. I am from Guatemala, and I run a startup that is an online store similar like Amazon, but we target Latin American immigrants in the United States so that instead of sending remittances to their remittances in cash to their relatives, they can buy products and services. So my question to you is the following. We are at the very early stages of the company. My partner and I have been funding the operation, and right now we are in the raising capital. And we have launched a minimum viable product, so we have some data that is giving us idea of the promise of the company. Yet, it's not enough to like tell you this is going to grow X, Y, Z. So we've built a very robust financial model and business model with cash flow projections and strategies that we want to implement. You, as investor, how would you measure how risky our company is, or any company in this stage where basically you are building based on projections, and as you said, you are looking for cash flow and EBITDA, but if we don't have that, how do you evaluate the risk and how can we overcome that? Thank you.
It's too early for me.
I mean, it could be based on your prior
I think
experience.
basically,
You started off.
you have, I think Hema referred to angels. So sometimes a good idea, and people like Ray probably are very successful angels also, you need to probably find an angel investor, somebody who is from your part of where you operate your business, who knows the area, who can establish connections with you in some form or fashion, and who can bring some good knowledge and advice along with a little bit of money. So you start up with that. Then there is a seed stage funds. Today, a lot of funds have come. They're very small funds. For example, they may have $10 million or $20 million, but they write checks of maybe $100, $200, $300,000, and they get very actively involved in making sure you can take that next step up in some sense in your journey. And once they're done, they are actually also very good at finding venture capitalists and do your Series A for you. So angel, seed, Series A is a very classical textbook way of going if you can manage it. But at your stage, you probably need somebody who's done this before or done something like this before, who's got some connections, who can bring some amount of money, maybe $50,000. Maybe in India, the popular check size for angel is about $25,000 to $50,000 per check. And they can bring a lot of value beyond just their money. And then you come to Series A, and then private equity typically comes at Series B or Series C. Sometimes, of course, nowadays we come right in the Series A also. But I would go methodically.
And I just want to add on to that one. At Silicon Valley Bank, we work with companies from super early stage, even idea, I would say. So happy to kind of talk to you offline to see how we work with investors and also some of the things that we have seen that does work for those early stage investors as well.
Hello. Hi. To your right. Hi. This is Jaydev. I'm the founder of a company called PyCube. I have a very specific question to both of you here. We've talked about the positives of all the things about startups, etc. Now, at the stages at which you're investing in, let's say the PE or stages beyond that, what are some of the red flags that put you off very specifically, let's say from a personality of the founder perspective and from the business perspective as well, so that this would help people to present themselves better to folks like you, or make sure that we don't do some or repeat some mistakes in front of you? That's a specific question. So what puts you off?
Yeah, what was the question? Well, one thing we do, a background check, and it's amazing how much you find out with someone that comes in with a great idea and so polished and stuff, and you just do, it's unbelievable how many people just don't do a simple background check. And so you'll find out all kinds of things. I don't know what it's like in India, but the United States is very, very easy to run a credit check on somebody. That's the first red flag I look for. The second is we look at employment background. See if they hopped around a million jobs. Have they started stuff up that have failed before? And look, I don't think failure is bad. I taught a class at the SMU Business School on entrepreneurship, and I said the first class every year I brought in someone who had failed in a spectacular way but handled it correctly. And they'd they had raised a bunch of equity, and for some reason it failed, but if you can't handle failure, how are you going to handle success? And so I look at that, and a lot of times I look at someone's background, if they've been in business 20 years or 25 years, if they haven't had any kind of failure, something's wrong, because everyone has had it, and we explore that with them more than their successes. And why did it happen? How did they handle it? How did their investors look at them after that? Would an investor, and I've invested again with people that have failed, that I've lost money with in the past, because there are a lot of things that happen that really aren't your fault, that just could be a fault of the market, could be a faulty analysis that was easy to dissect later on, and so those things. It's really, it's a character check in many ways.
You know, you're talking about red flags, so this is not about the positives, but what puts you off. And as Ray said, I think the background check is very critical. We would at least call 12, 14 people that might have known you before we make the final investment. Initially, we only speak to a few people. Actually, when we're evaluating you, we would speak to nobody because we don't want to be biased. But once we start speaking to you, then we start speaking to others. So I think the thing that puts me off the most is two things, actually, not one. One is the person is really not serious about what they're doing. They're in love with the idea of doing it, but they really haven't got their gut into doing it. There's a difference between your heart wanting something and your gut wanting something. And we are in the gut business. We are not in the heart-mind business. So heart-mind is nice, but ultimately you must feel it viscerally that if you don't accomplish, you know, there's a Swami Vivekananda says in one example that how much do you want God? And he says, if I take your head into water and put it down, how much do you want air? You must want it that much. So I think that is important for a person to be very, very serious. It's very, very critical. The second thing, obviously, we look for is whether the person will steal. And we've had such experiences, and perhaps, I don't know about America, but we certainly have experiences all over the world, if you ask me, that some people really have given to the temptation of stealing. And stealing can be many things. It can be siphoning money, it can be you giving money to your friends, it may be looseness of control. But I would say that I would look for these two, lack of seriousness and lack of integrity.
Right there. Question.
Good morning. My name is Itzban. I am from Panama. I am the co-founder of a travel tech startup. And my question is, what do you investors looking for a company who had, for example, 2 years, they passed the early stage, they established in their country, in the local market, domestically, but is ready to grow to other markets? What are you looking in those companies? What founders should focus when they ready to take investment to grow their business to other markets?
So just to repeat the question again from your early stage, it's very similar to the one before. What do you look from an MVP perspective? What, as an investor, what do you look from a founder? What is the right investment deal, right? Is it the growth or the product market fit, or is it the team?
No. After you reach product market fit and you're ready to scale to other countries, it's different what you are looking for a seed stage investment. I'm trying to know what are you looking for most for a company who's ready to grow, who passed the market fit stage and then is ready to grow to 5 different countries, for example.
So how to scale globally? Like, is that the question?
Exactly. What do you look in companies who want to scale globally after they pass the market fit stage?
Well, you know, one thing for you to look at, you almost need to turn it around and say, what are you looking for? Not what are we looking for. What you need is, an investor is someone who's done it before, who can surround you with great advisors. Because if you could go to somebody with a lot of money and say, I want to scale this thing globally, and you got a great idea, and they could write you a check. Money isn't always the answer. Expertise is the answer. And so a lot of people have been able to access, and I've seen a lot of people that have made a lot of money in one field. I saw this in the dot-com days. Some guys have made a lot of money, and then they think they're some expert. And so people come to them, and they were just lucky. And so the people they backed, they didn't do them any favors because they wrote them a big check, but then they just kind of went back to the golf course, and the guy just floundered. I'll tell you, a great movie is the movie on Ray Kroc. Did you see that one? The guy that started McDonald's? And his original investors were a bunch of guys he met at the country club. And so he gave them a bunch of franchises, and the guys didn't care. They just wanted to play golf. And so what he needed, really, what that story tells you is he needed somebody that had expertise and they could bring that to him. He's got, you have a bunch of Chili's. Well, you went with a company that you could put the money up, but Chili's had all this experience because they've done worldwide. So that gets you much closer to success than anybody would have done if he just wanted to start his own hamburger deal, and because he had a bunch of money.
And I would just add on to that to say, again, it goes to you and what the founder is looking for. It doesn't have to be 5 or 10 different countries that you need to go as a global expansion. You can take, it depends on your kind of the business model. Maybe it does need that over time, but it kind of, you need to analyze, do you have that expertise on the ground, either as a partner on the ground, or you yourself as a team on the ground to make that happen? So I think those are some of the key successes for a global scale founder.
And I will say, for both of us or anybody in private equity investing, where we get excited is when somebody comes in and they said, I've had this success in this particular business over and over and over again, and I sold my business and I want to go back in it. And they sit down with us and say, well, I don't have anything now, but I've done this. That's an incredible amount of confidence to us. But we want to also be able to look back at him and say, we can help you take this to the next level because we've done it again, and we're bringing you brain power more so than money power. Because, look, money's easy. I know it's hard to say with people out here all looking to get capital. Capital is not the issue in today's world. It's ideas, and it's also surrounding it with expertise.
Thank you.
Hi, Gopal. Great to see you, and always great to hear your views. I'm losing my voice. So my name is Seema Chaturvedi, and I wear several hats, one of which is being a newbie in the fund management business. I'm an investment banker by profession. And a question for Ray, as a group looking to launch new funds, when you play the role of fund of funds and you are providing debt, how do you get seen by the other limited partners who say, why does OPIC get to get the first draw? And does that become a bottleneck? How do you overcome that hump with other investors? So that's a question. And if you would allow me, I'd like to put in a tiny plug for women entrepreneurs, if I have your permission, because that is the other hat I wear. I am the chairperson of a State Department funded initiative called All India Roadshow for Women Economic Empowerment Through Entrepreneurship. For all the women out there, we are launching year 2 of the program. So women.tai.org. So that is the plug-in. Thank you for the time.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you for the question, but if you want to make a fortune, invest in an acoustics company, because I had no idea what you just said.
Oh,
so,
I
no,
lost my
I'm sure
voice.
you heard it. I am having the hardest time with the acoustics in here, so that's a business idea for somebody. No, we lean in where other banks won't go. So, for example, with Yes Bank, to come do this small business lending down in the market we want to go, if Citibank or Wells Fargo or something like that was willing to do it, or even Yes Bank, we don't want to be there. I mean, our whole purpose isn't to displace private banking or private enterprise. We're here to go to places where they won't go. Now, you could say, why didn't Yes Bank just do it? Well, they have a certain amount of capital they can.
No, Ray, just to clarify my question, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
It's
The
blurry.
acoustics here are difficult.
Okay, the question is not about banks, the question is about fund of funds, which is for OPIC to be a limited partner. How do you interact with the other limited partners who say OPIC is lending
I
as
see
a
what you're saying. We go in as a debt product in the funds. We don't go in as an equity piece. So, for example, if you had a fund, I could put up to 25% of it, but I'm senior debt to all, but I have a cap on how much I can make. It's like 6 or 7%. So if he raises his next India fund and I put 25% of the capital in, I'm the first money out, but I don't get any more than 6 or 7%. His investors that put in the 75% of the money get 100% of the upside, except for that minuscule little return we have. The reason we do that is to help funds go raise money. He could be a first-time fund. He can initiate a women's fund just focused on India. And people know if the U.S. government's involved, it helps them attract other capital.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the session. So my question is to Mr. Gopal. Sir, my name is Rohan. I'm from a startup called Bellatrix Aerospace. We are a tech company working on space systems, basically.
Can you speak louder a little bit?
Yeah, my name is Rohan. I come from a company called Bellatrix Aerospace. So we work in space systems, developing space technology. So my question to you is, since it's more tech intensive and more risks involved, so how does an investor, take risk and invest in tech-related startups? How prepared are they? Because the gestation period in such startups are a little higher. But the end goal is bigger because you see the space itself is a $350 billion industry. So when you see the growth through progress is a little longer than what e-commerce startups are. So how prepared are you is my question.
I think you need to find funds who have an appetite for frontier tech. And there are enough funds now who have frontier tech as a mandate. So there might be space, it might be something to do with sustainability, which require very long-term solutions. So these are funds which typically have a 10, 12-year life or more. So it's better to identify those kind of technology funds, early stage funds which do that. And there are, I think, quite a few of them around. I mean, right around you, or you might find angels. For example, if you take Team Indus in your own space, they've raised about 180 crores so far. And I think that's the best testimony to the fact that there is money which is willing to bet on long-term space technology and perhaps other frontier technologies in medicine or genetics or sustainability. So I think you just have to go and search. Like I think Ray was saying, you have to go and find those funds.
I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you to Gopal and Ray for sharing these candid insights, and hopefully it was helpful for you all.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you for doing a great job.